Testing, testing, one, two, three. Can you hear me now? I'm not sure if the volume's working here. Gonna have to do my own volume check, but it doesn't seem to be working. This is what I keep running into is they cut the volume to the microphone. Let's see what we got working here. Let's see what happens here. I have to go open up my own video just to check my own sound. Oh, we got sound. We're working. All right. All right, folks, you read the title here. Who was the man calling himself Captain Larry, who was living on an impounded ship in the Miami harbor in 1976 when I met him, claiming to be Oswald's handler in the Kennedy assassination? I was only 10 years old in 1976. And my mom worked at a restaurant in downtown Miami called Cincinnati's. So I'm going to give you the backstory as to how I ended up meeting this man and the curious things he had to tell me as a young man. And all I can tell you is in all the many moons of my life that I have contacted researchers involved in the Kennedy assassination, which now all the documents are supposedly released, no one, and I mean no one, took the time to respond to me or look into what I'm about to share with you here. And it's kind of a strange set of events, but it is what it is. And as I was saying, my mom worked in a restaurant called Cincinnati's in downtown Miami. These are the very verifiable things that I can share with you about being introduced to this man at the ripe age of 10, living in Miami, in the county of Dade. My mom was the head waitress at this restaurant called Cincinnati's in downtown Miami. And there was this very elderly man who frequented the restaurant quite a bit. And the layout of this restaurant was on a corner, and it was all glass windows. And the direction in which he was coming, he would have to come up the sidewalk with the restaurant windows on his right. And he'd have to come all the way down those windows, take a right turn down the front windows of the restaurant to get to the front door. And the reason why I'm sharing this with you will be pretty apparent here in just a moment. Every time he came in to get a cup of coffee, eat a Danish, eat dinner, eat breakfast, didn't matter what meal or what he was doing there, he always left $100 tip, or 100 debt note tip would be the correct term. So what began to happen and stir in the restaurant was every time this man would appear outside the window, shuffling his way to the front door, a fight ensued with all the waitresses as to who was going to serve him, because they knew it was a guaranteed $100 or 100 debt note tip. The owner of the restaurant, seeing the trouble that this was causing, instructed my mom, who was the head waitress, anytime he comes in, you serve him. And that way there's no more fight over who's going to serve him and get the $100, the 100 debt notes. And that is where my mom began to get to know this man who I only knew him as Captain Larry. He was living on an impounded ship in the downtown Miami harbor. he claimed to own a mansion in Argentina, a fully staffed mansion in Argentina. Claimed that his closest neighbor was Bob Hope. These are only the things that I can tell you about this man, who I have no idea who he was. Was he just some kook? Was he someone of a more ominous figure that, again, nobody wants to seem to approach, even though the evidence that is laid out, that will be laid out in this YouTube video. As for my experience, and of course my mom, who is still alive today and can verify that, yeah, this is what this man was making claims of, who he was. He, in fact, wanted to send my mom and myself and my sisters to live in this mansion, this fully staffed mansion in Argentina, where the claim was his closest neighbor was Bob Hope. I don't even know that Bob Hope lived in Argentina or had a property in Argentina or was a close neighbor to this mansion, this fully staffed mansion in Argentina. And realize I'm only trying to put together the information I have up to this point right now. Okay? So, here I am, 10 years old. My mom is invited to bring me and my sisters to come visit him on the impounded ship that he lived on in the downtown Miami Harbor, which we did. And that's how I was introduced to this man, just calling himself Captain Larry. Captain Larry made claims that he was Oswald's handler. He personally was Oswald's handler in the Kennedy assassination, and Oswald was absolutely brought in through South Florida because he was his handler. Again, all I'm doing is sharing with you what I know about the claims that were made by this man living on. Now you got to admit, it's a pretty strange thing to claim to own a mansion fully staffed in Argentina, but here you're hiding out on an impounded ship, a foreign impounded ship in the Miami Harbor. And at the time, I'm 10 and I'm just hearing what this man says, but because my name is Ken, or my calling is Ken, Kennedy, the Kennedy assassination has kind of always been on my radar. For whatever reason or another. Maybe because Ken and Kennedy, I don't know. But staying on task here. He claims to be one of the he had business in Argentina, correction. He had business in New Orleans. In his stories, that's where he claimed to be the first recipient to have his heart wired together in New Orleans. Just another kind of tidbit in trying to determine who this man was. I don't know who he was. I'm starting to have some pretty incredible, revelations of who this man possibly could have been and was. And it's just speculation. One of the other things that occurred while he was living on this impounded ship in the Miami Harbor was he shot two men breaking into the warehouse. He shot them from the top deck, the wheelhouse where he lived in the captain's quarters of the impounded ship that he was living on. which that made the Miami Herald. Only one more piece of evidence that would hopefully lead to, or possibly not, because we all know that having fake evidence or fake IDs is pretty simple, especially if you have the help of, say, the CIA, who he claimed to work with the CIA. There was some claims about the Hershey plantation bombing, some business going on over in Cuba. But the mainstay of what he shared with me as a young man, now remember, I'm 10 and I'm trying to absorb why he's telling me this stuff. But he was very on point about how Kennedy would not sell us out. And that's why he had to be assassinated. He just wouldn't go along with the program. He's telling this to my mom and, of course, me. And I'm 10 years old. I mean, we actually had talks of our own where you know, of course, my mom was there, but she really wasn't. And she knows about this. She knows about this. I know about this. And, you know, I've said, look, you know, here's the tidbits of information that I have to try to help determine who this man could have possibly been. Is there any truth to what he is telling me at the ripe age of 10 years old? I don't know. But here's what I have to try to help anyone who's a researcher in the Kennedy assassination. Look, even Bobby did not reach back out to me. Jack Bruce, who claims to know a lot about the Kennedy assassination, Dr. Jack Bruce, he didn't reach back out to me. He didn't respond. Researchers who I've written over the many moons of my life have never responded. And all I've done is saying, hey, here's what I have. Here's the information that I have. But the most shocking thing that came later on in life, not so awful long ago, was a scene in the movie Black Sunday. You know, where they made a movie about the, you know, crashing a blimp into the orange. And in a strange set of events, the man who was playing the part of my dad at the time, I didn't know any different, was a Dade County firefighter. And he was one of the standby paramedics in the making of this movie, Black Sunday, where they mocked and, you know, made the movie about crashing a blimp. And this was all being done. Oh, wait a minute. Go watch the movie so you'll know why and what was going on and what type of message was trying to be sent and who was involved, because they pretty much don't want you talking about the connections of the Nazis and other certain people around the world, including the CIA. And, you know, there was an instructor at the vocational school that my daughter went to. I'm just not going to share his name, but he claimed that he worked with the CIA doing computer analysis, and that he could put me in touch with someone with the CIA, which did happen. There was a phone call where I shared this information. This was just shortly before we became the Abomination. All I'm doing is sharing with you what I know, what I was told as a young man, how the information progressed, how it's been just completely ignored by anybody and everybody I've ever reached out to go, hey, can you help me figure out who this man was? Was he a kook? Is there anything genuine about what he was telling me when I was a young man. But let's get back to Black Sunday. In the movie Black Sunday, to my surprise later on in life, there's an explosion scene on the rear of a ship in the movie. And when it pans, there's the ship that this man who went by Captain Larry was living on. There's the ship in the movie Black Sunday. So now I'm just going to share the information with as many people as can possibly pick up on this. Where can you go with it? How can we prove who this man was? And see, now we're hearing about Hitler living in Argentina. Captain Larry was claiming he had a fully staffed mansion in Argentina. Captain Larry told me his closest neighbor was Bob Hope. He wanted to send me and my mom and sisters to live in this fully staffed mansion in Argentina. That, wait a minute, he wasn't even living in himself. Why, if he had a mansion in Argentina, was he living on an impounded ship in the downtown Miami harbor, telling me he was part of and associated with the CIA and was Oswald's handler, using him as the scapegoat in the Kennedy assassination? Operation Paperclip, all the Nazis brought over, NASA, all of the things that you start to put together here. And in 1976, how old would that make Hitler? I'm not saying it was him. But boy, I'm telling you, the evidence sure starts pointing to that. Was I actually talking to Hitler, who was still a player in the game up to the Kennedy assassination? Was there too much heat put on the fact that people were discovering that the Nazis, that the Germans had fled to Argentina? Was it becoming unsafe to be at the fully staffed mansion in Argentina? So therefore he was hiding out on an impounded ship in the downtown Miami harbor. And he was very isolated, living on this impounded ship in the downtown Miami harbor. That I can tell you, any company I can get, hey, Linda, bring your son and, bring your daughters, bring them over. I got to run around the ship unescorted. I got to run around down in the engine room. I got to run through the cabins. And from what I recall, this impounded ship still had a lot of personal effects hanging out in the cabins. And, for me, for a young man, it was pretty exciting being able to run around this impounded ship and listening to the stories that this man, calling himself Captain Larry, claiming to have a fully staffed mansion in Argentina, claiming to be Oswald's handler in the Kennedy assassination. And he was very emphatic about telling me Kennedy just wouldn't sell. He wouldn't sell y'all out. He wouldn't sell the people out. But now we see the releasing of all the JFK files, and it's pretty well known who sold us out, who killed Kennedy because he wouldn't sell us out. And I don't care who he was sleeping with or any of that business. That just doesn't even enter into the deal. So here we have Captain Larry, that's what he called himself. Obviously had a lot of money, $100 if you had a cup of coffee. This is the way I have been described him, and how my mom ended up getting to know him, getting the invitation. Hey, bring the, come to the ship and visit us. And we did. Living on an impounded ship in the downtown Miami harbor, claiming to be the first man to have his heart wired together in New Orleans. Claiming to be a part of the CIA, claiming to be Oswald's handler. And he was pretty blunt about that. They think Oswald got here this way or that way. He didn't get here anyway. They think he got here because they just don't know how he got here. They had trouble trying to figure out where he was or how he got here or how he was brought in. But it was his Russian connections that made him the scapegoat for the Kennedy assassination, going on hand in hand with the Cuban Missile Crisis. Hold on, buddy. That was a big deal of the day back then. So, he was pretty much sharing with me that the CIA killed Kennedy when I was 10 years old in 1976. And then as life went on, I see this coming out more and more and more, that the CIA was involved in killing Kennedy. But it was more than just the CIA. It was Israel, the Nazis, the whole gang. And I don't even know what you want to call them. Just call them the elites, the deep state. I call them what you want. But now you have the information that I have from my own experience, going about all the way back to 1976. The ship is in the movie Black Sunday. If you have a copy of the movie Black Sunday, I would hold on to that and hold it close to me. And I would think that ship appearing in that movie, it just blew my mind, because I knew exactly what I was seeing when I saw it. I was like, and I don't even know, I can't even recall when it was I was watching the movie Black Sunday, because my dad was a standby paramedic in the making of that movie where they were pretending to crash the Goodyear blimp into the Orange Bowl. And when it panned around to that ship, my mind was just completely blown. Just like, oh my gosh, there's the ship. How will I get anyone to believe what I'm saying? And it doesn't matter if you believe me. I'm giving you all of the evidence, all of the experience, everything that this man had told me. I'm giving it away, because there should be answers. There should be someone trying to look into this. There should be some manner or way to figure out who this man living on this impounded ship in the downtown Miami Harbor that I met at the ripe age of 10 years old, that my mom was serving at the Cincinnati restaurant in downtown Miami. Who, again, I'll say it again, claimed to have a fully staffed mansion in Argentina that he wasn't even living in himself. Why would he want to send my mom and I to go live in this mansion, but not living it in himself? First man to have his heart wired together claims that happened in New Orleans. Shot two would-be burglars from the upper deck of the impounded ship he was living on. And it was funny, because after that happened, we went and visited him again. He said, yeah. He said they were just breaking into the warehouse. So I shot them both in the leg from quite a distance with a .357 Magnum. It made the Miami Herald. So there, unless, of course, it's all been scrubbed, because we don't want any connections to aid in figuring out who this man was. That's my curiosity. My curiosity is, who was this man? And as more and more information came out, as I'm saying, over the many moons of my life, it started pointing towards, could this have been Hitler? Nah, come on. 1976, how old would that make him? This guy was, this man was somewhere in his high 80s, right up in maybe in his 90s. And, what better hiding place than on an impounded ship in the Miami Harbor that only he lived on? It wasn't like he had, a crew. It was just him living on this ship, which is in that movie Black Sunday. It's real quick. It's a real quick glimpse, but there it is. And it's just strange days that no one wants to talk about this. No one wants to acknowledge anything. Like, they don't even acknowledge that this man existed, that this man was living on an impounded ship in the downtown Miami harbor. There should be naval records, I would think, of an impounded ship in the Miami harbor. Pardon me. So, unless all the evidence has been scrubbed, because the man that they were hiding, I hate to use the word person anymore, the man that they were hiding on this ship, this impounded ship, was somebody that they didn't want anybody to know even existed. They wanted everyone to believe he was already dead. Oh, would that be Hitler? Maybe another member of the Nazi Party. I don't know. Anyway, now you have it. Do what you will with it. Laugh about it. Brush it off. Make claims that, what's it matter? I don't know. I don't know if it matters. But there you have it. Everyone have a great day.